These conservatives, I guess you can call them that, are gathering in Dallas for the annual CPAC convention beginning today. There is an argument, though, if they really stand for conservative principles. However, Donald Trump will address the event on Saturday. That should tell you something. Other high-profile speakers include Steve Bannon, Sarah Palin, and Sean Hannity. Far-right Hungarian Prime Minister, as we just heard, Viktor Orban, will also address the conference 1 week after his racist remark that countries where European and non-Europeans mix are, quote, no longer nations. Orban has been alienated by much of the European Union. But last week he met with Trump. And as the BBC put it, he will be among friends in Texas this weekend. Here's what columnist Dana Milbank wrote in a recent column in the Washington Post entitled, "A Hero of the Trump Right Shows His True Colors, Whites Only." He writes in part, quote, "Thank you, Viktor Orban, for showing us where the American right is heading. The Hungarian strongman who derailed his country's nascent democracy has been a darling of the MAGA crowd for his anti-immigrant policies. He has been invited as a featured speaker to next week's Conservative Political Action Conference in Texas alongside a who's who of Republican senators, governors, and members of Congress, as well as former President Donald Trump himself. But Orban made things awkward for his American friends a few days ago during a July 23rd address. He gave voice to the belief underlying his nationalism. He opposes the mixing of races. His July 23rd speech was an extended articulation of the Great Replacement conspiracy idea. That was too much even for one of Orban's longtime advisors who resigned and lambasted the prime minister for, quote, a pure Nazi speech worthy of Goebbels. She suggested that, quote, he was, quote, advocating the openly racist policy that is now unacceptable even for the Western European extreme right, but not for the American right. CPAC's organizer confirmed on Wednesday that Orban is still scheduled to address the group next week. It was good of Orban to spell that out, because now we know what Hungary's white nationalists and their American fanboys at CPAC have in mind when they rage against immigration and the Great Replacement. They want to take us back to the Dark Ages. Katty Kay, fill us in a little bit about Viktor Orban and why this is a beyond despicable choice for a speaker at CPAC. Well, in a long line of despicable choices of people who claim to be conservatives, but quite frankly, stand for the Republican right these days. As we head into the midterms, Republicans can be proud of racism, of Viktor Orban coming to CPAC, of perhaps backing a rapist's Bill of Rights, to use Joe's words, and so on and so on. I don't understand where this is going, but I also find it quite frightening at the same time. It doesn't appear to be dying.
So Viktor Orban is somebody who's been shunned by most of Europe, by most of the European Union. He is seen as too far right for Europe, but it seems that he can find a home here in America, and particularly at CPAC. So if that is the position you're in at Europe, you can come to America and find yourselves, as we put it, among friends. He's not only somebody who has espoused views that have been described as Nazi by people who had supported him. The aide who left who had been a supporter of his policies, said that she could no longer stay with him because his views were in line with Hitler's views about race, and specifically about the idea that races should not mix. So that is the man that is speaking at CPAC. But he's also done something else in Hungary, and I think it's important for Americans to understand this. He has dismantled democracy at home, and maybe that's the appeal. Of Viktor Orban to people at CPAC. He has systematically, during his tenure, rigged elections. He has changed the constitution to make it very difficult for his political opponents to run in elections. And he's rigged the media as well. He has put his own cronies in top positions in the media to make it even harder for his political opponents to get their views heard. So he has created a state that is really hard to define as democratic anymore inside the European Union. He has used his powers to change Hungary to make it more autocratic. That is the person that's been invited to speak at CPAC. And when Matt Schlapp, the chairman of CPAC, was asked about whether this was a good idea to have somebody who had autocratic tendencies like this to speak in America at a political organization, he said, well, if they have concerns about him, they could raise them. Raise concerns about somebody of the style of Viktor Orban. It seems a very mild rebuke of somebody who has done as much as Viktor Orban has to make his country autocratic.
Yeah, mild indeed, Charlie Sykes. And we don't have to wait for Dallas. Donald Trump's already met with Viktor Orban. We've seen video of it. They met in Bedminster, New Jersey this week. Pictures right here of a rather warm handshake. And let's also recall that one of the other most influential voices in the current Republican Party, Tucker Carlson, hosted a series of shows in Hungary a few months back, wrapping his arms also around what Orban is saying. How dangerous is this for what the GOP stands, and that these views are being filtered to your everyday Republicans, whether through the former president or perhaps through the number one voice on Fox News?
Well, it's clarifying, as Dana Milbank says, about what the right stands for, and it is extraordinarily dangerous because they're not pretending here. I mean, you don't have to work hard to connect the dots to see the fascination with Viktor Orban. You know, he is a featured speaker at CPAC, as we've been discussing. There's been a bromance between him and Fox News host, broadcast to millions of Americans, and of course, Donald Trump has gone out of his way repeatedly to embrace Viktor Orban. Endorsed him when he was running for re-election. I mean, imagine this: a former president endorsing, a foreign authoritarian leader. So what you are seeing is this overt embrace of post-liberalism. And we talk a lot about democracy, but what we're really talking about is the liberal constitutional order. And that's exactly what Viktor Orban is attacking in Hungary. And what he represents internationally is a post-constitutional, post-liberal constitutional order. Look, I don't think it's any secret why Donald Trump is fascinated with Viktor Orban. He has a thing for these strongmen. He has a thing for Vladimir Putin or for Kim or for others, a fascination with people who run roughshod over democratic norms. But yeah, I think to your question, though, when you see someone like Viktor Orban, given the kind of platforms that he has, that these attitudes are now being normalized to millions of Americans who think, okay, maybe liberal constitutional democracy is not the best way. Maybe we should actually seize the levers of power to inflict pain on the people we don't like, immigrants, minorities, gays and lesbians, because this is what Viktor Orban really does represent. And so it is a rather extraordinary moment. And Donald Trump, once again, is telling us who he is, what he admires, and the kind of model that he might follow if he ever gets back into power.
The headline in the BBC this morning captures it well. It says, Viktor Orban alone in Europe, but among friends in Texas, where he will be this morning. We are learning more.